Hey guys, my name is Rob, and I have posted not too long ago in the forum, or on the Facebook page, I should say, a wood texture, and I had some requests on how to do this. So I'm going to make a short little video, and it's not hard to do. It's a trick that was done, oh, I'd say many years ago, and it was done for Photoshop. Well, since Affinity Photo came out, I have no longer used Photoshop. So I kind of like put my own twist to this. It's not hard to do. It's just a couple of steps. And every time I do it, I notice I come up with a different texture. So, and you guys will probably have that same issue. It's not an issue, but it's a good thing because you get to be creative in doing this process too. I'm not going to go through every single thing that I did, but just the basics to get this wood texture going. So let's get started. Let's go to File, New. And the dimensions that I used for this texture was 800 pixels by 200 pixels in height, 72 dpi. So the web settings are fine, but if you want to do this for print, I would go with the higher settings. So for right now, let's just click OK. All right, the first thing we're going to need to do is come over here to our layers palette and click on add a pixel layer. Okay, and the next thing we're going to want to do is fill this. So let me bring up my colors. Now, again, this portion really doesn't matter. Let's just try to get like a yellowish, brownish color because you're going to end up changing that anyway in the next few steps. But anyway, to get a base coat down, let's go ahead and let's pick something within a yellowish, brownish type look. Something not too dull, not too bright. Some in this area here, maybe a little bit lighter. And we'll grab my paint bucket and fill that pixel layer. Okay. The next thing we're going to want to do, click on my arrow tool. Next thing we're going to want to do is add some noise to this because we need to have the wood texture, and in order to be able to do that, we need to add some noise. All right. So we're going to go to Filter, Noise, and go to Add Noise. Go ahead and click. And what I like to do is drag the intensity all the way up. Okay. Depending on the texture you're looking for, if you want less texture, you would go with a lower setting, but I kind of like a lot of texture in my wood, so I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. Next thing we're going to want to do is to blur this a little bit. Give it like a motion blur so that this looks more like, instead of like particle board, like wood grains. So we're going to go to back to filter, and we're going to go to blur and come down to motion blur. Now, I don't know what settings you're showing, but either 90 degree or 270 degree would be fine. Radius of 13 pixels is fine as well. You don't have to make any changes as far as I'm concerned, but again, you can adjust yours to anything that you'd like. The more motion blur you put into it, it's going to look kind of funky. So I kind of like using about 13 pixels. Then I'm going to hit apply. Now, I don't know if you could see it on your screen, but on my screen, I could see that the blur, let me try and zoom in so you guys could see, hasn't come all the way out to the edges. So there's a little bit of border here where it shows sharpness. And what we want to do is make sure that we don't see that in the finished product. So what I'm going to do is just resize this a little bit, take it up until the blurriness is covered all the way throughout. Okay, perfect. So we now have a start of our texture. Very simple. What we're going to do now is it's kind of bland. We have the markings, but wood has different types of textures, colors, and so on and so forth. It's not straightforward. So let's go ahead and add a Perlin noise effect. You're going to see what this does here. Let's go to make a new pixel layer. And next thing we want to do is make sure that our colors are back to default, which is black and white. Now we're going to come up to filters. We're going to come down to noise and Perlin noise. And what this does is add a little cloud effect. And what we want to do is try to get a good balance of darkness on both sides of this. So what we're looking at here, I don't want it to be too many. Something like that would be nice, where you have little dark areas. That's what we're looking for. We want the little dark areas to be consistent. Doesn't have to be exact on both sides, but at least if you have some on both sides, just adjust accordingly. So again, I like that. Let's just go ahead and apply. And what we have to do is change the blending mode in the layer here, because now it has covered up our wood texture. So let's go ahead and click where it says normal. And as you can see, as you come through, I like a soft light. I don't know how much you can see on your screen, but that's a good balance. It's not real dark. Again, as we go on through the steps, you're going to see how this is brought out even more. You don't want it too much in the beginning. So again, I would probably lower that down, that effect, to probably about 70–75%. That's good. And what we're using these clouds for, or these Perlin noise, looks like cloud effects. It gives it more texture. Wood just doesn't grow the line straight. They usually have knots in certain places. So to make a knot, that's why I use these dark areas. And what we're going to do, it's like a two-step process. But before we can do that, we're going to have to merge these visible layers, because right now we have a clouds layer or Perlin noise that was applied and our textures. So what we want to do is merge these two. So let's go to layer and merge visible. So now what that does is that puts it on its own layer. So it's one. Now, we really don't need these, but I kind of like to leave these in case something goes wrong in the process. I can always go back to this and adjust this accordingly. But in our case, we really don't need them, and I'm not going to delete them, but what I'm going to do is lock these down, because when we start moving things, you could accidentally move, and we don't want to do that. So in fact, we can go ahead and just turn them off. Let's go back to our final texture. And I like to rename things, and we'll call this wood. All right, now to make our knots in the wood, it's very simple. We're going to come over and we want to choose the elliptical marquee tool. I had the lasso tool. I was doing some work earlier, so I get a default. It's usually set to elliptical marquee tool. Is already there. If you're not seeing it, just click there and choose elliptical marquee. And I like to find a good balance where the dark areas meet the light. So I'm going to go ahead and select right here. All right, like an oval shape. And what we want to do is blend these edges, feather them out, because if you don't, when you do the next step for the knot, you're going to see these hard edges and it's not going to look right. We want it to blend in. So I'm going to go ahead and go to select feather, and usually 15 pixels would be enough for this. Now if you were doing high resolution, obviously you would need higher numbers, so I'm just going to hit apply, and now we can go into our persona here, which is liquify, and you have a bunch of tools here. We don't have to make any changes on this side, but we do have to select the twirl button right down here. And what we want to make sure is that our brush is a little bit bigger, not much, doesn't have to be exact height, but as far as the width, you want to make it wider. And all we're going to do is left click and hold the button down and watch the magic happen. So I'm going to left click hold, and you can see it starting to twirl. And what I'm looking for, I'm just holding my mouse down, and what I'm looking for is for these knots to appear. You see those knots, these two knots appeared? Perfect. That's what I'm looking for. I'm going to hit apply. And I'm going to go up to select and deselect. As you can see, it has that nice twirl in the wood, that little knot there. And it's blended in because we used the feathering. So let's go ahead and make another one on this side. I'll put one up higher here. Make as many as you want. Again, I'm looking for the dark where the dark meets the light. It's kind of hard to see on your screen. I always like to use an oval shape. Alright, and what I'm going to do is, again, feather that out with a 15 pixel feather. Hit apply. And again, I'm going to go ahead to our liquify persona. And this time I'm going to make my brushes as big as the actual, or even bigger than the selection here. That's going to give maybe a little bit of a different look, not much. Make sure our twirl is set. And come on over and just watch the magic happen. And again, I'm waiting for those knots to appear. Sometimes you can go further with it. There we go, it's starting. There we go, perfect. And just hit apply. And control D, the deselect, or just go to select and deselect. Now we got our knots where we want them. Okay, starting to look good. It's just, when you look at wood, the grains don't grow straight. They have sort of like a twist and turn to them. So what I like to do at this point in time is just to go to filter, distort, and maybe add a little bit of a twirl to this. Not much. You got to be careful when you use this effect. You just want a little bit here and there. Just give it a little bit of a twirl and hit apply. Okay. All right, so we're starting to come along really nice. And what I'm going to do next is do some adjustments here. So the color isn't that exciting, and it looks kind of fake yet. So what we want to do is bring more realism in adjusting the colors and tones and so on and so forth. In order to do that, I'm going to do a adjustment layer. A couple things you can do here. And it's, like again, I said, it's a matter of taste and how you want it to turn out. I like to do a color balance. Okay. I'm going to adjust more towards the reds. I'm sort of like a cherry look to it. Bring your magentas up a little bit, maybe some yellows. This is your midtones, and again, I'll adjust the shadows. Again, just a little bit, maybe some yellows. Now you're getting to see the texture come alive. I get excited when I see things like this. All right, I'm going to close that out to accept that. Come back down to my wood layer, and another thing I'm going to do is add a curves adjustment. This just gives it just a little bit more oomph to it. Bring that down a little bit. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. All right. So we're starting to see that gradient. Another thing we could do is, if it's too saturated for you, we can come in and use an HSL adjustment. So I'm going to do that in just HSL, and maybe bring down the saturation a little bit. Or bring that down just a little bit. All right, good enough. All right, so we have our colors set to the way we like. Like I said, you can adjust this any way you like. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You don't have to do exactly what I do. Um, like I said, every time I do this texture, it turns out different every time. So um, just play around until you're happy with it. Another thing I do, well, that I did do with the texture was add an effect. You gotta make sure I'm on my wood texture and maybe choose a 3D effect and make sure we have that selected. Now with wood, you don't want to have that specular shininess thing going on. Depending on how you want it. I mean, some wood finishes are a little bit shiny. Could bring the ambient light up or darkness, bring it down some, and bring up the radius a little bit on how you want your wood to be textured. It's just a matter of what it is that you like. All right, we're starting to get that look that I like. I'm going to hit close, but another thing you could do is add a bevel emboss if you wanted to, and just adjust this down a little bit. Give it that that white along the top. There's a little too much. Let's bring that down just a little bit. There we go. Now, that's basically it for the wood texture. The other thing that I did was I added, I split it up into 3 pieces. So what we can do for that is I just simply grab the pen tool, make sure there's no fill, none, and the stroke is set to black, it's fine. And we're just going to drag this up probably about maybe 2 or 3 points. Let's see how that works. Oops. Okay, I'm going to come over to the top of the wood here. I'm going to click once, and I'm going to hold the Shift key down, and that brings up that line so I can see exactly where it's going. All right. Now the next thing I'm going to do is add, you can either add a 3D look or a bevel emboss, it doesn't matter, to give that indent look. Let's come down to bevel emboss. Pillow set to fine, that's fine. And just go ahead and close that out. And all I did was duplicate that and drag it over until I get close to 3 even squares. Let's bring that over just a little bit. Yeah, it looks good enough. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay. All right. So basically that's about what I did. And another little trick, I put some little burn marks in here. You could do that either through using the burn tool or make another layer. I'll just show you real quick. I'll put this right about here. I'll go over to the curve. I'll make another pixel layer. And what I like to do is just simply, let me choose a different brush. Just a simple brush here. And I'm going to resize that a little bit. And I'm just going to simply draw. I don't like the way I did that. You don't have to have it perfect. And what I usually do, that's kind of strong, so I'm going to bring that down just a little bit. Maybe change the blending mode if you want to multiply. And maybe add an effect to blur that out. Yeah, we'll use a Gaussian blur. That's about all we need. Just a little bit of blurriness. You don't want it too much because then you can't really see. Just to give it that darkness. And then you can come along, and after you've done that, just sit here and color in some spots along the colors. Just little spots here and there. You don't have to be exact. And it's starting to get that older look to it. There you go. The computer's doing something weird every time I draw over it. Just like seems like it erases it. Okay. The only other thing I'm going to show you, because this could take up to a couple hours to do, doing the nails and doing the cracks and so on and so forth. It's just showing you how I did the text real quick. So grab my artistic text tool and drag up. And I'm just going to simply type in wood. And basically I chose Times New Roman because that's a good looking font. Times, there we go. And what I'm going to do is resize this a little bit. Right about there. And Command T or Control T to bring up your character panel. And what I'm going to do is just adjust my text here a little bit. Bring the letters closer together. Right about there. Then I'm going to adjust the spacing between. There we go. That's exactly what I'm looking for. All right. And what I do is, there we go, perfectly in the middle, is duplicate this layer. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. I'm not going to duplicate that like that. This is an easier way. All I'm going to do is control click on that little thumbnail of that text here in the layers palette. And that'll put a selection around that. And what I'm going to do is I don't need this anymore. I'm going to come down to the wood texture layer. Click on that layer, make sure it's selected, and hit Control J. And I'm going to go ahead and deselect this, going by select, deselect. And now I can come in and on this layer is adjust the settings. It's a little too much. Bevel Emboss 3D. I'm not going to soften that up. And you can adjust it to however you want. A little specular shininess. You bring it up lighter and so on and so forth. You can adjust this however you like. That's good enough for me. Close it up. And another thing I did was I tore off some pieces. Now that's very simple to do. This will be the last thing that I show you. What I'm going to do is go ahead where the elliptical marquee tool is and select the freehand selection. The next thing you want to make sure that add is set. Normally it's just new. Make sure add is selected because you're going to be making more than just one selection. And just make little parts around this. You know, wherever you want this chunks to be taken out. And it's not hard to do. Just simply make selections. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just simply go around. Right there is a good part I can take out. And once you're happy with that, I want you to hit Control J, and that's going to put these chips on their own separate layer. and then come back to the wood layer and hit delete. All right, now we can come back to the chips and just make sure arrow tool selected. Just drag out and just take it out chunks. Now let's go to select, deselect. Click away so we can see what we just did. Another thing we could do for this is to reactivate this layer. You want to make sure that your wood text is above this. So now it looks like, okay, now we got the edges underneath. There's something else underneath there. And what we can do for this one is adjust the opacity so it's not as dark. And so on and so forth. Another thing you could do for these chunks here that we just taken out is maybe change the effect and maybe add a maybe an outer shadow and make it look like they're just floating above. Do an offset there a little bit. There we go. We also want to make sure that when we do that, that these, let me rename this so I don't get confused. We'll say chunks. And just drag this above that. There we go. That's what we're looking for. And make sure they're above that. All right. Looks good. And that's about all I'm going to show you. I mean, there's tons more things we could do to this, and there was other things that I did to make it look more realistic, but you get the gist of it. I hope you learned something from this. Just let me know if there's anything else I could do for you. Till then, happy creation. Thanks.